It's the 1 year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, the 1 year remembering of the brutal snatching of his life. It was the taking of his life that brought about this global awareness of the racial inequities and injustice that really never just went away. We just cleverly disguised it behind racial equality policies and clever wording. But COVID-19 rendered us a captive audience. We were forced to confront the lived realities not only of black people in the US specifically, but black people everywhere by extension. Everywhere in the Western world that we find ourselves living. Just follow the data. The data will tell you the story. It made us look, again, across all our institutions. Over this past year, we've looked at our practices, our cultures, our policies, our behaviors. We've created racial awareness action plans, engaged D&I experts and racial awareness leaders. And we've committed ourselves across industry to fill in all the gaps that we see amongst black and Asian and brown people at the top of industry and the top of leadership. But you know, all of this is going to be meaningless going forward if we don't talk about the why of race and racism. Race, as Ta-Nehisi Coates said, is an idea, but it's racism and systemic white supremacy that actually give life to the idea. It perpetuates the idea. It sustains the idea. And it's the one conversation that we never seem to engage in. We discuss the what of racism. We discuss how racism works, how racism manifests itself across society and continues to do so, but we never discuss the why. Why was this idea of race and systemic racism, the construct, why was it originally created? I think we ignore it, because if we begin there, then we are truly committed to telling and retelling history and reframing narratives and putting them back in their proper places. We begin with why, and when we begin with why, we are forced to tell the truth about the people and the histories that we've lied about. And we begin to see the damage that it has caused. It's caused not just to black people who have to bear the brunt of that lie, but also to white people who have to live through that lie and live via that lie. Because truly white people can't know the truth of themselves and their history until they face the truth about us that has been stolen, destroyed, and rewritten in order to make room for histories about them. The historical truth of black people is to be found before the creation of race and the construct of racism. Because race and racism was originally created to destroy the truth of black and brown people. That's why we have to begin with the question why. We just have to begin with the question why. Every construct begins with an idea. And from that idea, we create a story, we create a narrative. From those stories and narratives, we create behaviors. And it's those behaviors that produce practices. And it's that practice that gives way to policy in the end. And what is the end? The end is a knee on the neck of George Floyd. And George Floyd's everywhere. That's why we have to begin with why. And if we are to really face this sickness called systemic racism, in all of its systemic forms, let's begin with why. Let's begin with why. That way we'll be better able to understand and dismantle and reject racism in all of its ugly forms and all of its manifestations. When we begin with why. All of us, black and white, were born into this construct of systemic racism and white supremacy. We were all born into it. We had no choice and had no part in its construction. We were just born into its reality. But today, in 2021, we do have a choice and we do have a part in its deconstruction. That's our power now. That's our power now. So let's make that choice. Let's make that choice. Let's write that history. And if we're going to honor George Floyd, and if we're going to be a part of this global spiritual awakening to who we are as human beings, to the lies that have been told about us as human beings, and to the truth of who we need to be in order to be fully human beings. If we are to live in that reality, we have to begin with why. So on this anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, let's begin with why.